Hannah stood in the clearing, her heart racing as she looked at the mysterious figure before her. He was tall, with dark eyes that seemed to see right through her, and a smile that made her uneasy. The air around them felt heavier, almost as if the world itself was waiting for her decision. The man's voice was calm, smooth, and filled with certainty. All you have to do is promise. Promise that you will follow through, and I will give you everything you want. Your family will never be poor again. You will never want for anything. Hannah swallowed hard. She thought about her family, her father working tirelessly on the farm, her mother always baking and cleaning, trying to make their home warm and cozy. She thought about the long days of hard work they had endured, the constant struggle to make ends meet. But then she thought about the offer, the riches, the comfort, the ease that could come with it. Could she really bring all of that to her family? Could she make their lives better? The voice in her mind urged her to accept. It told her that all her dreams could come true if she just agreed. But something deep inside her hesitated. She wasn't sure what this promise would truly mean. Would it be worth it? "Why do you want me to promise?" she asked, her voice shaky but determined. "What do you gain from it?" The man's smile deepened. "I gain nothing but what is mine to take," he said, his voice soft but chilling. "You, on the other hand, gain everything you desire. All it takes is one promise, and everything you have ever wanted will be yours." Hannah took a deep breath. Her thoughts were a whirlwind. She wanted so badly to help her family, but at the same time, she wasn't sure she understood the price of this deal. Could she trust him? The man's eyes never left hers. "You know what you want," he said. "The choice is yours. No one else can make it for you." Hannah closed her eyes, thinking of her family and the life she had always known. The promise seemed so simple, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Still, she couldn't help herself. The temptation was too strong. "I promise," she whispered, her voice barely audible. As soon as the words left her mouth, she felt a sudden rush of energy. It was like the air around her had shifted, and the world seemed sharper, more vivid. The trees seemed to stand taller, their leaves rustling softly in the wind. It felt like something had changed inside her, something she couldn't yet understand. The man's smile widened, and he stepped back. "Good," he said. "You've made the right choice. You'll see the rewards soon enough." With that, he disappeared, vanishing into the shadows of the forest, as if he had never been there. Hannah stood alone, her heart still racing, unsure of what to make of the strange promise she had just made. The next day, things started to change. At first, it was small things. things that might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. The crops in the garden seemed to grow faster than usual. Flowers bloomed overnight, and vegetables ripened in the blink of an eye. It was as if the land itself was responding to Hannah's promise. Jack and Lily noticed the changes, but at first, they didn't think much of it. They were just happy to see the farm thriving. The animals, however, began to act strangely. The chickens, who usually clucked and roamed freely, grew quiet and still. The cows, who were usually gentle, seemed uneasy, shifting nervously when anyone came near. Hannah's parents were concerned, but they couldn't quite put their finger on what was happening. They thought the strange behavior might be related to the storm or the changing seasons. But deep down, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Meanwhile, Hannah felt different too. Her senses were sharper, more alive than ever before. The trees in the woods seemed to call to her, and when she walked through the fields, the wind would always rustle the leaves in her direction, as if it recognized her. The promise she had made the night before seemed to echo in her mind, louder and louder each day. At first, she tried to ignore it, but it was hard. It was like the world itself was reacting to her. The more she walked through the fields, the more she could feel the power within her growing. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard the voice again. It was clearer now, almost as if it was right beside her. "Hannah," the voice called, "you've made your choice. Now everything is yours for the taking." Hannah sat up in bed, her heart pounding. She had made the promise, but she wasn't sure if she was ready for what that meant. The voice seemed to be everywhere now, filling her mind with promises of power and wealth. But was it really worth it? As the days passed, the changes in the Anderson farm became impossible to ignore. The crops grew at an unnatural speed, ripening far faster than they should have. Jack and Lily couldn't believe their eyes, but they were thrilled by the bounty of the farm. It seemed like their hard work was finally paying off, even if they didn't fully understand how it had happened. But not everyone in Briarwood was so easily convinced. The other villagers began to notice the changes too. Mrs. Bailey, who had warned Lily before, was especially concerned. She watched from her window as the Andersons' farm flourished and the animals grew strange. Something didn't sit right with her. One afternoon, she paid Lily another visit. "Lily, we need to talk," Mrs. Bailey said, her voice serious. "I've seen the changes in your farm, and I'm worried. Something isn't right." Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Bailey lowered her voice. "I know you've been having trouble with your crops and animals, but these changes, they're too sudden, too unnatural. People in Briarwood have heard whispers, stories about deals with strange figures, promises that come with a price. Lily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard the stories too, but she had always dismissed them as just that, stories. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lily said, though she couldn't help the worry creeping into her voice. "It's just the farm doing well. Nothing more." Mrs. Bailey looked at her carefully, her eyes filled with concern. "Please be careful. I don't want to scare you, but I've seen this before. It never ends well." Lily didn't know what to say. She trusted Mrs. Bailey, but she also knew that their farm had never done better. Everything seemed perfect, even if there was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. As the days passed, the mysterious man did not return, but his influence seemed to hang over everything. The farm continued to grow, but the unease in the air never quite went away. The animals remained distant, and the town began to whisper more and more. One afternoon, as Hannah was walking near the edge of the woods, the man appeared again. This time, he was standing in front of her, not in the shadows, but in the open, right at the edge of the town. "Why are you here?" Hannah asked, her voice shaking with fear and confusion. The man's smile was cold. "I've come to claim what is mine." Hannah frowned. "What do you mean?" "You made a promise," he said simply, "and now it's time to fulfill it." Hannah took a step back, her mind racing. What had she really agreed to when she made that promise? And why did it feel like the man was trying to control everything? "I'm not sure I want this anymore," Hannah whispered. The man's eyes glinted with something dark. "It's too late for regrets, child. You've already given yourself to me." Days passed, and the changes on the Anderson farm only grew more intense. The crops were growing faster than ever before, and the animals, while still quiet and uneasy, seemed to stay close to the house. Jack and Lily were thrilled by the changes. The farm had never been more successful. But Hannah could no longer ignore the strange feeling that had settled in her chest. The mysterious figure, the man with the dark eyes, had appeared several times since her promise. Each time, his presence left her with a sense of unease, like something was slipping out of her control. One evening, as she walked through the garden, her thoughts were heavy. The voice in her mind, the one that had first called her into the woods, was growing louder. It wasn't just whispering now, it was demanding. The more she tried to push it away, the stronger it became. "You are the one who made the promise," the voice said, echoing through her mind. "You are the one who can change everything. The power is yours." Hannah paused. The voice sounded so reassuring, so confident, but there was a growing feeling inside her that something was wrong. She thought about her family, the life she had known, and how everything was starting to feel more distant. Suddenly, everything she had gained, the fast-growing crops, the quiet animals, the strange power she felt, no longer seemed like a blessing. It felt like a trap. Hannah's heart pounded in her chest as she walked toward the woods, the trees darkening in the evening light. She had to see the man again, confront him. She needed to understand what she had really promised. When she reached the clearing where the man always appeared, he was there, waiting. His dark eyes watched her closely, his expression unreadable. "You have come," he said simply. "I don't want this anymore," Hannah replied, her voice shaking. "I didn't know what I was agreeing to. I didn't understand." The man's smile didn't falter. "It's too late for regrets. You made the choice, and now you must follow through." "No," Hannah said, shaking her head. "I didn't know. I didn't know what I was really promising. This isn't right." The man's eyes darkened, and for the first time, there was something colder in his gaze. "You cannot undo a promise. You must keep your word, no matter the cost." Hannah stood her ground, her heart racing. "I will not do this anymore," she said, her voice firm. "I want my family back. I want my life back." The man's smile faded. He stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. "You cannot break what has already been set in motion." Hannah took a step back, her mind racing. She had to break free from him. She had to find a way out. Hannah's thoughts were a whirlwind as she faced the man in the clearing. Everything she had gained felt like a dream, a false promise that had trapped her. She had wanted to help her family, but now she realized that the price of her promise was too high. The man's eyes narrowed as he watched her. "You think you can walk away from this?" he asked, his voice cold. "You cannot break your word. It will be fulfilled." Hannah stood tall, her heart pounding. She could feel the power that had been growing inside her, but it no longer felt like a gift. It felt like a weight, a burden that she could not bear. "I don't want this power," she said, her voice steady now. "I don't want anything from you. I want my family, my life, back." The man stepped forward, his dark eyes glowing with something darker, something that felt dangerous. "You cannot escape. Your promise binds you." But Hannah was no longer afraid. She felt a surge of something deep inside her, something stronger than fear. It was love. Love for her family. Love for the life she had known. She had made a mistake, but she wasn't going to let it destroy everything she cared about. "I reject the deal," she said, her voice louder now. "I will not keep my promise. I choose my family." The man's eyes widened, and for a moment, it seemed like the world itself held its breath. Then, with a chilling laugh, he stepped back. "You think you can break free?" he said, his voice filled with menace. "You think you can undo what has been done?" "I can," Hannah said, her voice full of conviction. "Because I choose what's right." With those words, the world around her seemed to shift. The power that had been building inside her began to fade, like smoke disappearing into the wind. The trees, the wind, the earth, they all seemed to sigh in relief. The man stood silent, his expression changing to one of disbelief. "No one has ever rejected me before," he muttered, his voice low. "I'm not yours," Hannah said firmly, "and I never will be." With that, the man's form began to fade, his presence slowly disappearing into the darkness of the woods. His laughter echoed for a moment, but then it was gone, leaving only silence in its wake. Hannah stood alone in the clearing, her heart still racing, but her mind clearer than it had ever been. She had broken free. She had chosen her family. When Hannah returned to her home, everything felt different. The air was clearer, lighter. The strange energy that had surrounded her and the farm was gone. The crops, though still healthy, grew at a normal pace. The animals, who had been restless and quiet, seemed more at ease. Jack and Lily were waiting for her when she returned home. They could see the change in her immediately. She wasn't the same as she had been before. Something had shifted within her. "Hannah?" Lily asked softly, looking at her daughter with concern. "I'm okay, Mom," Hannah said, her voice calm. "I've learned something important." Jack stepped forward, wrapping his arms around her. "We've all been through a lot, but I'm glad you're home." Hannah smiled, feeling the warmth of her family's embrace. She had almost lost them, but now she knew the value of their love, of the life they had together. The promise she had made had been a mistake, but now she could make things right. That night, as they sat around the dinner table, Hannah told her parents everything. She told them about the voice, the man in the woods, and the promise she had made. She told them how she had almost lost herself, but how she had found her way back. Jack and Lily listened carefully, their faces filled with concern and love. They didn't understand everything, but they didn't need to. They understood what mattered, that Hannah was safe, and that they were together. As the days passed, life in Briarwood slowly returned to normal. The Anderson farm, while still thriving, settled back into a peaceful rhythm. The crops grew at a natural pace, and the animals returned to their usual calm selves. It was as if the strange events of the past weeks had never happened. Hannah, too, found peace. She spent more time with Ethan, helping her parents around the farm and enjoying the simple joys of life. She knew that true happiness didn't come from power or promises. It came from love, from family, and from being true to oneself. One evening, as she sat on the porch with Ethan, watching the sunset, she realized that she didn't need anything more. She had everything she needed right here: her family, her home, and the beautiful world around her. And that, she knew, was enough.